Go in. Right up. To 1:30. I believe. Hey, want some calendars and pictures?
Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you decide that you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember, we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked for his protection with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. The 12 steps. 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. 2. Came to believe a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry it out. That out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaim, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is, we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description to the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear three permanent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. C, that God could and would if he were sought. Being convinced that we are at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood him, just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do? The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by Okay, I'm going to just stop it here, and we're going to go on to living sober, because this is, just wanted to read a part of how it works in the 12 steps. And I think that it's good to start reading number, let's see.
I ain't got 2 salads, man. I ain't got 2 salads.
Let's talk about making use of telephone therapy. Number 10, making use of telephone therapy. When we're first trying to achieve sobriety, many of us found ourselves taking a drink without planning to. Sometimes it seemed to happen practically without knowing it. There was no conscious decision to drink, and there was no real thought about possible consequences. We had not intended to set out an entire drinking episode. Now we have learned that simply postponing that first drink, putting something else in its place, provides us with a chance to think about our drinking history, to think about the disease of alcoholism, and to think about the probable results of starting to drink. Fortunately, we can do more than just think about it, and we do. We telephone someone. When we stopped drinking, we were told repeatedly, get AA people's telephone numbers. And instead of drinking, to phone these people. At first, the thought of telephoning a new acquaintance, someone we barely knew, seemed strange, and most of us were reluctant. But the AAs, those who more non-drinking days behind them, let me read that again. But the AAs, those with more drinking days behind them than we had kept suggesting it. They said they understood why we hesitated because they had felt the same way. Nonetheless, they said, just try it, at least once. And so finally, thousands and thousands of us have. To our relief, it turned out to be an easy, pleasant experience. Best of all, it worked. Maybe the quickest way to understand this before you try it is to put yourself mentally in the place of the person being called. It is a rewarding and gratifying thing to be trusted that much. So the person receiving the call is the most invariable, So the person receiving the call is the most invariable, nice, even charming about it. Not at all surprised and even glad to hear from us. There's more. Lots of us have found that when we wanted to drink, we could telephone someone more experienced in sobriety than we were. and it was not even necessary to mention that we were thinking of drinking. That was often understood without a word, and it really did not matter what time we called, day or night. So I'm going to stop it right there just to share briefly that when I was 3 months sober, my husband at the time, we had to go to a wedding, and I was so nervous to go to that wedding because I was only 3 months sober. I could still salivate when I saw alcohol, you know. So before I went to this wedding, I gathered phone numbers. Actually, I didn't even think to gather phone numbers. I shared that I was nervous about going to this wedding, only being pretty much 90 days sober. And there was a gentleman that, you know, reached out to me and said, "Hey, just take my number." And it wasn't like he was trying to be my sponsor. It wasn't like he was trying to, you know, get with me romantically. It was actually really comforting because, you know, this town is so small. We often bump into people that we see a lot. And this gentleman so happened to be a father. His kids went to the same school as my kids, and we would always see each other in passing. But then we saw each other in AA, you know. And I felt very comforted that, you know, he gave me his number. It wasn't anything sexual. He had a wife, I had a husband at the time, and we knew it was strictly for support for that. And I didn't think that I was going to use it until I got triggered at the wedding. And I said, what am I going to do? I feel triggered. You know, my husband at the time was drinking, having a great time. And I felt that I was almost forgot about that I was with him. But it wasn't really like I was forgot about. It was just that I wasn't a part of because I wasn't drinking. So I pulled out my phone and I called my fellowship brother. And it was a relief. We talked a little bit and I felt better. And I was able to return back to the reception, even though I was a little uncomfortable, but I returned and I didn't pick up a drink. And it was really challenging because I thought that if I was going to relapse, it was for sure going to be there. And I didn't do that. And that was a relief, and that was a blessing. You know, I was all the way in Santa Barbara to be able to reach out and connect and talk to somebody, and you know, that had the same similar experience as I did was very comforting. So I'm on page 24, the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph down, where it reads, sometimes for no apparent reason. Sometimes for no apparent reason, we found ourselves suddenly, unexpectedly undergoing an onslaught of anxiety, fear, terror, even panic, which made no sense. This happens to lots of human beings, of course, not just alcoholics. When we told the truth about the way we really felt, what we were doing, and what we wanted to do, we found we were perfectly understood. We got total empathy, not sympathy. Everyone we called, remember, had been in exactly the same boat sometime or another, and they all remembered vividly. More frequently than not, only a few moments of conversation made our thought of a drink disappear. Sometimes we got practical, eye-opening information or gentle, indirect guidance, a tough, direct, heart-to-heart advice. Sometimes we found ourselves laughing. Observers of recovered alcoholics have noticed the extensive network of informal social contact among AA members, even when we're not at AA meetings. And often, when no one is thinking or talking of drinking, we found that we can have about as much social life with each other as we want, doing together the usual things friends do, listening to music, chatting, going to plays and movies, eating together, camping and fishing, sightseeing, or even visiting in person or by note or telephone, all without the necessity of a single drink. Such acquaintanceships and friendships have a unique value for those of us who choose not to drink. We are free to be ourselves among people who share our own concern for the maintenance of a happy sobriety without being fanatically against all drinking. It is possible, of course, to remain sober among people who are not recovered alcoholics and even among those who drink a lot. Though we will probably feel some social discomfort in their company, but among other sober alcoholics,
I'm sorry.
it's okay. I'm just going to keep reading because that's just you can excuse yourself. That's okay. Thank you. But I love you. But among other alcoholics, we can be sure that our recovery from alcoholism is highly prized and deeply understood. It means a lot to these friends, just as their health is cherished by us. The transition to enjoyment of sobriety sometimes begins when newly sober. We keep in touch with others equally new at the game. At first, it often seems a little awkward to strike up friendships with people who have been sober for years. We're usually more at ease with those who, like ourselves, are just setting out toward recovery. That's why many of us make our first telephone calls about not drinking to our AA counterparts. Or not counterparts, compadres. Nope. Hold on a minute.
Plugged in?
Oh, that's great. You gotta plug it in over here. Did you see the movie The Holiday?
No.
Contemporaries. Telephone therapy works even when we don't know any individual to call. Since a number for AA is listed in practically every telephone directory in the United States and Canada and in many other countries, it is simply to dial that number and instantly be in touch with someone who honestly understands at gut level. It may be a person we have never met, but the same genuine empathy is there. Reaching out through the internet can also help making a connection with another alcoholic in your own hometown or perhaps halfway around the world. Once the first call is made, it is much easier to make another when it is needed. Finally, the need to talk away the desire for a drink virtually disappears for most of us. When it does, many of us find, however, that we have established the beneficial habit of occasionally friendly telephone visits. So we kept them up because we enjoy them. But that usually comes later. At first, telephone therapy is primarily for helping us stay sober. We reach for the telephone instead of a drink, even when we don't think it will work, even when we don't think it'll work, even when we don't want to.